Hey girls, so by this point, you should have at least taken a look at your quiz. It is due it's due by tonight at 11:59. So I'm going to move forward and we are going to skip ahead a little bit and we are going to tackle Chapter 7. Chapter 7 deals with the market structure. We are going to be looking at perfect competition and monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. We're going to be looking at antitrust, economic regulation, and competition. Let's consider some things. What does a share of Microsoft stock have in common with one head of cattle? What is so perfect about perfect competition? And why don't most monopolies last? These are just some of the questions that we're going to be looking at. Section 7.1 is going to be looking at perfect competition and monopoly. Here are our objectives. We want to distinguish the features of a perfect competition. We will define that shortly. We want to describe the barriers to entry that can create a monopoly. And lastly, we want to compare the market structures of monopoly and perfect competition in terms of efficiency, a term that we are very familiar with. So let's look at some key terms that are going to be introduced to us in 7.1. Market structure, perfect competition, commodity, monopoly, market power, and barriers to entry. Perfect competition. So market structure. These are important features of a market, including the number of buyers and sellers, product uniformity across sellers, ease of entering the market, and forms of competition. Perfect competition is a market structure with many fully informed buyers and sellers of an identical product and ease of entry. A commodity is a product that's identical across producers. Example markets: a share of large corporations, foreign exchange, agricultural products. Okay, and with market structure, we're going to be looking at features and questions to ask. So we're looking at first the number of buyers and sellers. Are there many buyers and sellers? Only one? Just a few? Looking at the product's uniformity across suppliers. Do firms in the market supply identical products, or are products differentiated across firms? Ease of entry into the market. Can new firms enter easily, or do natural or artificial barriers block them? And forms of competition among firms. Do firms compete based on prices, or are advertising and product differences also important? Market price. So, girls, let's just backtrack. Hold on, let's backtrack a second. Think about an example of a perfectly competitive market would be Google, right? In a perfectly competitive market, let's say for wheat, right? An individual supplier is a wheat farm. In the world market for wheat, there are tens of thousands of wheat farms. So any one supplies just a tiny fraction of market output. This is the same thing for pizza shops, the pizza shop market, right? There are plenty and plenty and plenty of pizza shops, and they all produce the same thing, pizza. That's just an example. Okay. Market price. So market price is determined by the intersection of the market demand curve and the market supply curve. The market demand curve says that as the price of a product goes up, demand for it goes down. Market supply curve indicates that as the price for a product goes up, the supplier's willing and ability to supply this product also goes up. The demand curve has an inverse relationship with price and demand, whereas the supply curve has a positive or direct relationship with supply and price. Market equilibrium in a firm's curve in perfect competition. Okay, what we want to look at really quickly is this concept of equilibrium. Okay, 1 second. One moment. Okay. Equilibrium, guys. The word equilibrium means equal. It means that it matches, right? So if you're looking at perhaps, if you're looking at the market equilibrium and a price per bushels of wheat, okay, you will see that at $5, there are 1,200,000 bushels of wheat sold per day. Okay, the firm's demand, right, stays constant. It's equal because it's an equally perfect competitive market. Okay. When we look at monopolies, we've looked at before in the past, earlier this year. Monopolies are the sole supplier of a product with no close substitutes. Market power is the ability of a firm to raise its prices without losing all sales to rivals. Okay. Barriers to entry. So barriers to entry are restrictions on the entry of new firms into an industry. There are 3 types of entry barriers. There are legal restrictions, economies of scale, and control of essential resources. Okay, so when we talk about legal restrictions, girls, with the legal restrictions, governments can prevent new firms from entering a market by making entry illegal. Patents, licenses, and other legal restrictions can be imposed by the government to provide protection against competition. The government can become a monopolist by supplying the product and outlawing competition. So, for example, like states, like the government, they sell liquor and lottery tickets, and you cannot sell liquor anywhere but a state store. That's why they call it a state store, because you can only buy liquor from a store that is provided by the state. Lottery tickets, you can ever hear the Pennsylvania lottery. It's not called the Courtney Weiss lottery, all right, because it's funded by the state. They have a monopoly on the lottery. U.S. Postal Service, right? They have the exclusive right to deliver mail. You cannot deliver mail using anything other than the Postal Service. Economies of scale. Economies of scale deal with monopolies because sometimes a monopoly will emerge if a single firm can satisfy market demands at the lower average cost per unit than other guys. The market demand is not great enough for more than one firm to take on this business, basically is what it's saying. So that means that, a single firm will emerge from this competitive process as the sole supplier in the market. Think about electricity, right? We don't need more than one PECO. We don't need more than one PGW. Okay. This is considered a natural monopoly. Other monopolies would not survive. When it comes to essential resources, right? Basically sometimes the source of power is a firm's control over some resource critical to production. For example, think about China. China is a monopoly supplier of pandas to the world's zoos. The National Zoo in Washington, D.C. rents pandas from China for $1 million a year. As a way of controlling the panda supply, China stipulates that any offsprings from the Washington pair becomes China's property. That's the deal that a lot of zoos have with China that have pandas. Monopolists may not earn a profit. Although a monopolist is the sole producer of a good with no close substitution, the demand for that good may not be great enough to keep the firm in business. Just like how true, pure economies don't exist, right? Pure centrally planned economies don't exist. True monopolies are rare. A profitable monopoly attracts competitors and substitutes. For example, railroads and the trucking industry, local cable TV providers and local phone services, wireless transmission of long-distance telephone calls. In the U.S. Postal Service, we have fax machines, email, the internet, FedEx. No, true monopolies are rare. Because people say, hey, that's a great idea. I want to do that too. And so That's why you see Verizon, Comcast, DirecTV, stuff like that. Monopolists are not guaranteed a profit. Monopolies can lose money. They're relatively rare. We're looking at monopoly versus perfect competition. So competition forces firms to be efficient and to supply the product at the lowest possible price. That's, The Invisible Hand of the Market by Adam Smith. Okay. Competition kind of helps us out because the market produces what we need due to our demand. And therefore, that's why you can go to the store and get eggs at a low price. Let's say Acme says, everybody buys eggs. Let's boost the price of eggs. They would never get away with this because people would just go to Giant or Wholesale Foods or, other markets to get their eggs, right? Because when there's competition in the market, it forces products to be sold at the lowest price possible. People can't get away with selling eggs for $20 a carton because there will always be a competitor that sells it for less. Monopolies charge higher prices than competitive firms. With monopolies, consumer surplus shrinks and is much smaller than consumer surplus with perfect competition. When monopolies have control over a market, they boost the prices really, really high because there is no competition. Okay, so looking here. Okay. Price per unit, quantity per period, the market demand. As the price goes up for a unit, the market demand goes down. Other problems with monopolies: resources are wasted securing monopoly privilege. Monopolies may grow inefficient. However, economies of scale are a good idea. We love government regulation, right? Because it protects the people. However, we'll get into that. Keeps prices low to avoid regulation. Keeps prices low to avoid competition. All right, girls. So that's all we have for section 1 of chapter 7. What I want you to do is I want you to go through and jot down all of the key terms, all of the bolded terms. I want you to answer the checkpoint questions. And I also want you to answer, I think that's it. I think that's all I'm going to have you do for now. So let me know if you have any questions. And please submit your work by Thursday at 11:59.